Hello, everybody. I'm Seth Weissman, and welcome to another episode of Safe Real Estate. Today, I want to continue our discussion of mid-year forms changes for 2025. And the form I'd like to talk about today are changes that we made to the purchase and sale agreement. And specifically, we made two pretty important changes to the default section. And let me tell you what those changes are. First, one of the things we have specifically now added is that the seller can now sue the buyer if the buyer defaults and has not paid all of the earnest money that the buyer was supposed to have paid. So let's say we have a situation where the buyer was going to pay $10,000 in earnest money. They write a check for the earnest money, and after the end of the due diligence period, the buyer's earnest money check bounces and the buyer never shows up at the closing. In that situation, the seller now can go ahead and terminate the contract, and the seller now can go after the buyer for the $10,000 that the buyer should have paid. I think this is a good change. It helps protect sellers, and I think it should help ensure that buyers honor their obligations under the contract. The second change we made is as follows. Under our contract, if either the buyer or the seller default, the real estate broker can sue the defaulting party for the compensation they would have been entitled to had the transaction closed. The challenge, however, is that with decoupling, a defaulting party may have no idea what all of the brokers are being paid in the transaction. So in order to make it easier for brokers to win compensation lawsuits in court, we have given both parties the right to inquire as to what the compensation is of all of the brokers in the transaction. Now, frankly, we did this somewhat reluctantly because we want to preserve, or we hoped to preserve, the privacy of those compensation agreements. But again, the challenge is if we want to win in court, judges are increasingly saying that a party has to know what compensation obligations they may be assuming in the event they default. So a defaulting party can ask. Both brokers are then obligated to disclose to that party what their compensation is. The final change that's worth noting is a change to the emergency section, which is a relatively new section in our GAR purchase and sale agreement. And what we have now done is we have capped the length of the emergency to 8 days. And the reason that we did that is that, much to our surprise, our governor this year has declared some emergencies that have gone on for weeks and weeks at a time. And we really can't allow real estate transactions to simply percolate out there for weeks or months without eventually a closing taking place. So the thought is, let's cap it at 8 days, and hopefully that will give the parties enough time to make arrangements to deal with whatever the emergency may be. The other change we made in this area is if the agreement becomes binding during an emergency period, then the parties have no extra time because they are going into the emergency with their eyes open and are obviously aware of what the emergency is. So if there's a hurricane and 5 days after the hurricane, the parties enter into a purchase and sale agreement, there would be no additional time allotted because of the existence of that emergency. I hope you like these changes to the purchase and sale agreement. I hope you also like this episode of Safe Real Estate. As always, it's great to see everybody. Please continue to tune in. Bye now.